Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you for being here on time and, well, being here very early, even earlier than I was. As I said before, I'm going to keep admitting people as we go through the introduction, and then after that, I'll probably lock the room just to make sure that we continue everything smoothly without too many interruptions. All right, so this is the first time we're doing this kind of series, and it's just a way for us to be able to get parents and professionals in the same space to share information and advice, and just for all of us to be able to learn more from each other. So thank you so much for being here. We are actually oversubscribed right now, but I know not everybody will make every session. So I've been very, very, very happy with the response so far. So thank you for that. Just some ground rules, which I know everybody is more or less adhering to anyway. Just keep the videos turned off, just to make sure we don't take up too much bandwidth. And also to mute your mic. Everybody's automatically muted, but you do have the option to unmute yourself for question and answer sessions. So keep the videos off, mics off. The session is being recorded, but if I use it later on, I'm not going to have any names or faces or anything like that visible. So all that will be obscured to just keep everyone's privacy. On the topic of confidentiality, some of the things we might discuss in these groups, it might be some personal information shared, and I would just like everybody to keep that information private, respect each other's privacy and their confidentiality as well, so that we can have a safe space for everybody. And also, even if we have a difference of opinions on different things, just to keep being respectful of everybody's opinion. If you have any questions that you want to be answered now or throughout the question and answer session for any of these sessions going forward, you can always put the question in the chat. You can either do it privately, just send it to me, or if you want, you can send it to everybody. Maybe somebody else has the same question. And if we cannot get through all of these sessions in the question and answer portion, then the person, whoever the question is directed to, they will answer it afterwards. So have no fear, ask your questions and it will get answered, hopefully in the session. If not, it will get answered afterwards. All right, so let's get to the introductions. A lot of you know me already, because there are a lot of familiar names here, a lot of unfamiliar names. For the ones who don't know me, my name is Aaliyah Drakes. I am an occupational therapist, a children's occupational therapist. I am your host for all of these sessions, but today I will be one of the speakers that we'll have to talk about play and independence and those things. I am the director of Opal Kids, and I've been an occupational therapist for 12 years now. I've only worked with children, and I've worked here in Trinidad and Tobago, in England, and I've done some work in St. Lucia as well. I'm currently doing my master's degree in special and additional learning needs, because occupational therapy in the school system, that is my passion. That's really where I, want to direct my energies, including in addition to working in the clinic. But so far, I've spent most of my career in a clinical outpatient kind of setting, working with kids of all different backgrounds with many different conditions. So I've been fortunate to be able to see a wide variety of lots of different type of things and work with lots of wonderful families. For those of you who don't know what occupational therapy is, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Occupational therapy is a medical health profession, a paraprofession, where we work across the lifespan from birth all the way to older adults and until they die, to help people remain or become as independent as they can whether they have a short-term or long-term disability, or illness, or condition, anything that prevents them from doing the things that they want to do or need to do. That's where we would jump in. So for children, that means we get to play a lot, because play is how children learn, and that's what helps to motivate them. And we work on different things like motor skills, making sure the muscles are strong enough, making sure they have coordination and balance. We also work on sensory skills. We work on the cognitive skills, like being able to follow a plan from start to finish. We work on self-care skills of dressing, feeding yourself, and we work on social skills in some aspects, like being able to play with other kids and being able to regulate your emotions and being able to self-regulate to be able to do things. So you're going to learn a lot about more of that as we go through this session and all of the other sessions. Now, for today's topic, we are going to talk all about promoting independence in play specifically, but also learning. Now, over the past couple of months, parents have had to become not just parent, but you parents have had to be teacher, you've had to be best friend, playmate, therapist, everything, because everybody has been at home. And I know that that would be very, very overwhelming to, be managing all these things at once. And teachers too, they have been, well, they have had to change completely how they do their work, and they haven't had enough time to prepare. Maybe haven't had the resources or the training. So teachers too are in a sense where, they're kind of like a fish out of water too. So I wanted to address this topic because I feel that especially for children with special needs, the natural thing to do is to want to help them, dress, and to want to, bathe them and feed them and do things for them. Sometimes in the interest of time, if you're, trying to rush and trying to get everything done, but also because it's not easy to see somebody struggling to do something and kind of backing off and saying, well, no, I'm not helping you. But on the flip side of that, it can become counterproductive because it might not always give the child the opportunity to be able to develop these skills on their own. So it's important to allow kids to try things, to let them make mistakes, and then to let them try it again and get better and better. But of course, they still need your guidance to be able to make sure that, they can do it properly. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago or more, we had done a webinar for parents on occupational therapy in the home. And this focused a lot on chores and the benefits of chores and how they help with development. But we also looked at a whole bunch of different activities that you can do at home using things that you might have lying around the house. So just little games and activities to make things fun, but also to work on development skills. And I'll send you guys the link to that afterwards in an email if you want to check it out, because those are some of the ways that you can play at home with your kids that are easy or simple to implement. But for today specifically, I wanted to look more at play skills and how we could reach children at their level to start to develop the play skills and the social skills. We will talk about play in other weeks because there are different aspects of play that we are going to address with our speech therapists and our developmental therapists. But for today, we're going to look at the foundation of what you need to be able to play and what you need to be able to start having that kind of social interaction. All right. So let me tell you all, one of my biggest things with play right now, everywhere, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, is that I find play is so structured. everything is just about, okay, you have to do this now, do this now, do this now. I mean, thinking back to when I was younger, I remember it was my sister, my cousins, and myself. And I don't even know where parents were at that point, but we would be jumping out the window onto the concrete floor, onto a cushion that would move. So we fall onto the floor. We would be jumping on from the cupboards, running around in the yard and doing all sorts of things. And just, having gymnastics competitions and things and playing. That was our idea of having fun. Of course, not knowing that we were learning. And a few years ago, I was looking for some Lego blocks, some green Lego blocks. And I went to Toys R Us in the States because I thought, I'm going to find my Lego blocks here. Can't go wrong. Went to the Toys R Us, and all of the Lego things that they had there, it was just kits and sets of how to make specific things. It was a kit to make a boat, a kit to make a plane, a kit to make people. And I couldn't find just random Legos that children could play with and be creative and make their own things. And I was so disappointed because I felt like all of the toys were saying, and all of the toys that I see since then, they're just saying, this is what you have to do with this toy, and this is what you have to do it. And it's not really giving kids an opportunity to be creative with it and to use their own imagination to build things and to do things. So that's my kind of gripe with toys nowadays, and just with play being structured. Now, don't get me wrong, and Gabby, who's our guest today, will talk about this a little later. Structured play is great, it's important, and we need it for certain aspects. And not every child is ready to, do free play, but we still need to have a mix of both. And we're going to discuss a little later why it's good to have both types of play for your child. Now, for children to be able to get to the level where they can do structured play and do free play and have fun, you still need to have certain little building blocks to get there. So I'm going to go through first some social skills you need to have to be able to get to a level of play, and then also different types of play that you're going to have. All right. So let me talk about some social skills first that a child might need to have to be able to have good play skills. Now, what you can do for this is, in thinking about it, you could kind of maybe think about where your child might be along this and kind of see, well, okay, maybe my child is not at this level yet. Maybe, oh yeah, that sounds like my child. And when you identify where your child is, then you know where the next level, that's what you're going to try to aim for. So the first level of social skills and being able to, have that interaction with somebody else is by the child just being a solitary onlooker. So the child is, let's say you are playing with blocks. You will sit down there, playing with blocks, and then your child is looking at you, not engaging, don't want to know what's going on, anything like that, but paying attention to what you're doing, not interested in being a part of it. From there, you can move on to parallel play. So parallel play is where your child will be playing here, somebody else might be playing here, and there's still no real interaction, but the child is starting to notice what's going on with you. Maybe still not sharing anything. They don't want to take any blocks from you, you giving them blocks, or you trying to take their blocks and they're not having it. But they're still okay with being in your space and playing side by side. And then you move on to something called parallel aware, which is where You're still playing side by side, but now you're starting to have a little bit of a bond. So this is where if your child is in that parallel aware stage, maybe you're playing with Lego blocks and you could put two Lego blocks together and they have two Lego blocks and maybe they would see you putting your blocks together and they might put their blocks together too. So you're starting to have some imitation there. Or it could be that in this stage, you have your two Lego blocks and then you give it to your child and then they take the Lego blocks from you. And maybe they might give you their Lego blocks. So you're starting to get a little bit of interaction there between two people. And from that, then you move on to turn taking. So turn taking can't happen until you have those steps before where the child is engaging with you a little bit in that kind of one-on-one way and starting to share things with you. If you try to do turn taking before any of that happens, that's when you're gonna get a whole bunch of meltdowns and tantrums and screaming because your child doesn't really understand that it's okay to have that back and forth. So for turn taking, you need to have a little bit of imitation and a little bit of giving and taking items. And after you have the turn taken, then you get on to a state where the interaction is reciprocal. You could play games, you could have rules, and you have a good understanding of being able to, have that back and forth interaction with somebody else. So those social skills, I mean, it follows a staircase, I guess, where you have these different steps to get through before you get to the point where you can have a meaningful interaction. It doesn't mean that if your child is not at the top level, you can't interact. You could interact from the start. By just you playing and having a child onlooking, that's a relationship happening right there, and you still want to encourage that, even if your child is not or doesn't look to be actively doing something with you. I am seeing some questions coming in, so I'm gonna get to the questions later on because I'm seeing a couple of them I know we're gonna address in a little while. So I'll get to those. I'll answer the question and answer sessions afterwards. So once you have those kind of social skills going, you can think about playing with your child. So for play, the same way you have different levels to get through to be able to have a good back and forth interaction with your child, you have levels of play that you want to get through as well. So the first level of play is sensory play. And this you find a lot with typical development. You find it a lot with babies. And for kids with special needs, you might find it lasting longer if the kids have extra sensory needs. They might be in this space for a little bit longer. So sensory exploration is that phase where you're just kind of feeling out how things work. You're checking how it looks, you're turning it over to look at it. You might be checking how it feels, the textures, shaking it to see how it sounds, putting it in your mouth to see how it tastes. And for this kind of phase, it doesn't look like if the child is playing much because they're not using the toy how you want them to. But this is a way for them to interact with the toy. And it's just for them to explore. It's just really exploration, feeling out all the sensory properties. So if your child is at this phase of sensory exploration and you find that they're not really playing with toys too much, they just kind of, feeling out, seeing what is what, encourage it. But encourage it by giving them lots of different types of sensory things to explore. So if they might be only interested in blocks and banging blocks together, maybe you can get something else for them to bang together and see how it feels. Take two soft balls and bang them together so that they can hear the difference between hard blocks and the softer balls. Or we love to play with dry rice and different textures so that they can get an idea of all the different sensations. So if your child is still in that phase, go with it, but expand it and include as much sensory experience as you can. And from there, you're going to get into functional play. So functional play is where you have cause and effect toys, where maybe you push a button, you hear a noise, or you take the drumstick and beat the drum. So cause and effect toys, very simple. You do something, something else happens. But they start to understand that there's a process involved in doing things. And if I do something, something happens. So if your child is at this phase, of course, you can also continue this, but do different things, have different cause and effect toys, ones that light up, ones that make noise. You can have drums, musical instruments, blocks, where you can build blocks or stick the Legos together. From that, you move on to pretend play. So this way you might have, your child might start to play school and pretend to be the teacher, and then all the little stuffed toys are the students. Or you might have using a play phone as a pretend phone, or using a banana as a phone and coming to bring the phone to you to talk. So again, if your child is here, you want to encourage that. You want to encourage that pretend play and allow it as much as possible. And then you move on to games with rules and a little bit more structure, where it can be something as simple as tag, where you have one or two rules to follow, or it can be more complex games like maybe a card game. And then finally, when the child is able to manage some rules, you can get into games where they might have to come up with rules on their own. You have to interact with other people when you're playing. You have to be a little bit more flexible in case rules change. So this might be playground games where children make up their own games and rules and things like that. So the main thing is that when you figure out where your child is, that's where you want to develop it. And don't move on to another phase beyond that until you make sure that they master the one that they act. So if your child is still in a functional play phase where it's more cause and effect and you're dealing with more simple toys, you don't want to move ahead to a board game, even a simple board game like Candyland. You don't want to move on to something that you're not ready for yet, because you have all of those phases to get through in between there. And as much as possible with play, you want to start with the things that your child is accustomed to. So if your child loves to play with cars, play games with cars. If your child loves cars, you can start with you playing with the car and they will observe you. And then you can start with they have their cars, you have your cars, you playing with the cars, they playing with their cars, and then you might try to give them one of your cars and see if they take it and see if they're okay with you taking one of their cars. And then you might have a back and forth where you take turns, you drive your car up the wall, then it's their turn to drive their car up the wall. And then when they get better at it, then you can move on to something else besides cars, using the same things. So just broaden a little bit what they can do. So let's move on to some more aspects of play. And I'm going to bring on now Miss Gabinia Rayside. Now, Gabby, she has a Bachelor of Science degree in Behavioral Sciences, and she's about to graduate with her Masters of Science in OT from USC. So she is going to be, is soon to be one of our homegrown OTs that we have here in this country. She enjoys volunteering. She volunteers with Bridges to the Heart, and she's waiting to start some training with We to Me mentor program with Volunteer TT. So, and she said she loves music, but even though she has lots of musician friends, she doesn't know how to play a single chord on any instrument. But I wanted Gabby to come on today because she and her classmate did their final research project on the topic of play. And I found it was so interesting just to think about play maybe in a different way and try to realize the importance of just playing, that I wanted her to come and talk a little bit more about it. So let me just unmute her. Or Gabby, if you're here, just unmute yourself because I'm not really seeing you. All right. So, like I said, your research project on play, I felt it was such an interesting topic just to do research on, but also the things that you found out from your topic. It just kind of stayed on my mind since you did the presentation a few weeks ago. So for the first thing, you can give everybody a little background on what your research project was about.
Okay, so our research project was basically to find out how free play could be interacted and could be integrated in therapy sessions with kids and occupational therapists. I guess firstly, I should start off by saying the difference between free play and structured play. So structured play, as mentioned earlier, would be like games with instructions. So like snakes and ladders, volleyball, football, anything that follows instructions and does not give room for imagination and just doing whatever you want to do. Unstructured play or free play would be, I know some people when they were younger, they used to be in cardboard boxes, pretending it was a vehicle or a truck, or making mud pies and pretending it was food. So all of that would fall under free play, just using your imagination and using the resources and the tools around you to enjoy playing, whether it be by yourself or like with company. So with our research, we focused on 4 questions, and it was whether what was the perception of parents and occupational therapists on free play, what were the barriers to free play and therapy sessions, and if there was a difference in goals between parents and therapists, and lastly, what were the facilitators for free play in therapy sessions. So out of those questions, the answers that we got would have been for the perceptions between parents and occupational therapists. They both believe that free play encourage socialization, trust building, whether it be between child and therapist or child and parents, and behavior regulation. So as a lot of you may know, when a child, whether typically developing or special needs, enters a new space, they may not want to leave mommy or daddy. And because of that, they may have a little meltdown, they may throw a tantrum, loads of tears. And we found that free play helps with the transition and makes it easier for them to transition from leaving the parents or leaving the caregiver to coming into the session and having a productive session, whether it be for 30 minutes or for an hour. One of the barriers, the main barrier that we found, was the severity of the diagnosis. So our study focused on autism, but I guess in this case, it doesn't matter. So like whatever severity, so whatever diagnosis the child has, the severity of that diagnosis would also determine how well a child is able to participate in free play. And one of the 3 of the goals that both parents and therapists had were the bond and the relationship between the client and the therapist, interpersonal skills, and diversification of play. And by diversification of play, we explain it to be that a lot of times children diagnosed with autism or any special needs focus on one thing. So if it's a car that they really like, they will be rolling this car every time, every day, 3 hours a day. That would be the same movement. But if it says you allow that, so in this session, we realize, okay, this child loves to play with cars, and instead of us allowing them to just roll the car from here to there every day, we might incorporate, like, we might turn this into a game of like car racing. So I might take a car and they would have their car, and we would try to roll it and see which car reaches the end first. And that way we'd extend the play that they know to be just rolling from here to here. It would then extend to from here to there, and it would be like a car racing game. Also, some of the facilitators that this will reveal were free play can be used as a reward. So it can be used as a reward for good behavior. And whether typically or special needs, I'm sure when all of us were growing up, if you did your chores, you would get to go and watch TV, or you would get to go outside and ride your bike. It's always known as a reward. Like play in itself is always known as a reward for doing something well, or listening to rules and instructions and following through with the rules and the instructions. Personal interest, so you would find that a child would participate in free play if the resources that are there is something that they are interested in. So again, with cars, if they have like 5 cars available, you would see that as soon as they come in the room, they would go and pick up the cars because they are interested in that. If there are things that they're not really interested in, they probably won't be as anxious to participate in free play. And lastly, a space. I mean, you can't participate in free play if you don't have anywhere to play. And like you could create a space out of anywhere. So if you have a room, and you like just clear out some space in your room, declutter some space, and that could be a space to incorporate and to have participation of free play. But in our study, when we said space, we more meant for like clinics. But in this instance and in this situation, if you're home, you could just declutter some space and have some space. I mean, have a yard. So like free play could be incorporated anywhere.
Okay, so I know, as you say, in free play and playing home and that kind of thing. I know a lot of times in our schools, especially here in the Caribbean, the push is academics. And we know play is so important for all the reasons you just said, but also in helping to develop muscles and to develop all the different skills. So with schools that tend to focus so much on academics and you have to be able to write at 3 years old and that kind of thing, play now is kind of left to parents at home. So how or what are some ways, what are some of the ways that parents might be able to incorporate play skills home if they declutter and have a space and that kind of thing? How, how can parents play with children? Wait, let me see if you can unmute again. Right.
Okay, yeah. So firstly, Pinterest is your greatest friend.
For real.
Ideas on Pinterest. And I would speak in the context of the situation now because I mean schools are closed until September. So now you would have to create a new routine for both yourself and your child. I would say to incorporate games and incorporate fun ways and like experiments into academics. So in that way, you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So like if you want to do letters, I guess you could use P's to make it fun and make it very play-like so that you could so that you could do academics at the same time and do play at the same time. So you won't have to be wondering, how am I going to schedule the day, like a rigid timetable of academics and making sure that I incorporate play. And I guess like even if you go with a schedule, like how school would be, because I mean, you would want them to be able to transition when September comes, the 20 minutes that they would get for recess and the hour that they would get for lunch, the free play could happen then. So in that break, you allow them to do whatever they want. Nothing structured. They don't need to go and watch TV. They don't need to go and play like a board game. Anything that they want. If they have siblings, go outside and play catch. I don't know, fling stuff at the trees. Anything that you have in your space. Like nothing is when you talk about free play, nothing is really mandated resources wise. So you just like use whatever that you have in your home.
I'm gonna ask you something about free play. I I'm not electronics generally, but in terms of free play as using electronics, what do you think about that? Using iPad, blah 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 for your free play.
I think there needs to be a balance. I don't think I would have mentioned it before, but some of the stuff that we found as well in the research is that free play helps with your physical well-being. So like running, you would get like coordinated. It would help with coordination. It would help with balance. It would help with core control. It would help with all those things. And I mean, if you're running, if you're sitting down on an iPad with an iPad, you're not really running, so that coordination is kind of eliminated. I mean, you would get like fine motor skills depending on the game that you're playing with on the iPad, but I mean, everything has its time and place. So I believe that you should have a balance between technology because we are in 2020, advancing in technology and I don't want to leave that behind. So I believe that you should have a balance between technology and like outdoor stuff. So whether it could even be riding a bike. As much as riding a bike is not like free play, it will still help with the physical aspect and the physical benefits of free play.
Totally agree with finding balance because I know especially now too, sometimes your iPad and your laptop and everything has to be your friend because everybody is home in the house at the same time and it is a way for your child to be able to have some maybe quiet time where maybe if you need to get something done and you don't have to be the one to entertain all the time and to play and do all these things. So now especially, I kind of ease up on the stance a little bit about using electronics a lot, but still completely agree with just finding out whatever balance works exactly. To me, a parent is saying here to maintain the balance is difficult because parents have a ton of work to do. And I think there's where too, sometimes it's just picking your balance. I mean, some days you might be able to get in your play and do your structure and all that kind of thing. And then some days it just doesn't work. Some days you might have to end up being, all right, you're on the iPad or you're watching TV for more than you should be, and it's fine. I mean, admittedly, I spent a lot of time when I was younger watching TV, probably way more than I was supposed to. And now I spend a lot of time on my phone. So, I mean, I can't knock it too much. All right. But thank you so much for that, Gabby, for just sharing your insights on play and really the importance of having play incorporated in everyday things, but also in having a lot of free play and having the opportunity to have free play, even if it mightn't look like play. What I'm going to do now, there were a couple questions in the chat, so I'm just going to open up the chat a little bit to answer those questions, and if there's anybody else who has any other questions, you can either raise your hand or use the little raise hand icon at the bottom there, or you can put it in the chat now, or when I finish answering the questions, I'll unmute everybody. Okay, one of the questions somebody was asking was about visual impairments and advice for visually impaired toddlers. Now, visually impaired, it just means that one of your senses isn't working as you want it to, so you're going to use the rest of your senses. So I had one of my clients with a visual impairment, and we did lots of exercises. I would have her doing things like, you know, squats, push-ups, all kind of things, but we use a lot of sensory play. So we would use, instead, you'll use things that you could feel, especially your tactile sense, because people with visual impairments use their hands a lot to be able to communicate. And especially with things like writing braille and being able to feel things, you want to make sure that your tactile sense is fully developed. So you want to be using a lot of different textures, and you can maybe hide things for them to find inside different textures. If it is that you're hiding Lego blocks inside a bowl of cotton balls so that they could feel the difference between the soft texture and then the hard texture of the blocks, and then you take the block out and you put it together. With my client, I had her doing things like with putty. I had the coins in the putty, and she had to take the coins out of the putty and then put it in a container. And I mean, she was able to do these things fine because it's not something that you need to be able to see to do. So for things like, you might be able to do things, cause and effect toys that will light up, but you'll be able to use cause and effect toys that have sound. So you could do things like playing drums, hitting a xylophone. You can have, there was a musical thing in my head just now that ran out of my head, but when it comes back, I'll let you know. But for anybody with visual impairment, you're just going to focus on your other senses instead to be able to develop their play skills. But largely, you still want to focus on the tactile skills because that's what they're going to use a lot to be able to communicate. Okay, there was another question here on, is there any correlation between Takata and Parsons classification? Now, admittedly, I don't know what that is, and I did a quick Google search while Gabby was speaking to find out, and I can't find information on what it is, but I will find out and I will get back to you on it. Okay, I'm seeing a choice question here. Any advice on a child with a behavioral disorder? Yes, we are going to discuss that a lot in about a few weeks when Kevin Cheng is here. He's a developmental therapist, and we are going to talk a lot about how to manage different behaviors. Now, what I will say now is that behavior is communication. So whatever the behavior is, there is a reason for that behavior. And for now, is trying to find out what the reason is. Is it a sensory-based thing? Is there too much noise going on? Too many people around? Is it that the thing that they're playing with might be slimy or messy or something that they don't want to be involved in? Or is it that they are uncomfortable in another way? So whatever the behavior is that you're seeing is really to try and figure out what that behavior is trying to tell you so that you will have an idea of being able to manage it a little bit better. But in a few weeks when Kevin comes on, we're going to talk about that behavioral thing because there's a lot to say there. Any ideas for sensory play for toddlers? Yes. Sensory play for toddlers, you can have, I think we had a whole bunch of this in the OT in the home thing, but sensory play for toddlers, you can use water. That one is a big one, even if it's just playing in a bowl of water. And for this stage, if you're using water or rice or any kind of sensory thing, you could work on things like pouring. So if your child is now at the stage of just splashing around in the water or just, you know, playing with things and not really doing too much functional yet, just use a whole bunch of different sensory experiences. You can use dry rice, dry beans, cooked rice, cooked pasta, homemade Play-Doh or homemade Play-Doh. You can use Oh God, so many things I'm thinking about that you can use. But for a toddler, use a whole bunch of different sensory experiences that you could find. Hide little puzzle pieces in cotton ball so that they could find it. You can use Jello and put little toys in Jello and then put it in the fridge so they have to dig in the Jello to find it. And then if they eat the Jello, it's fine because it's on their hands. So yes, will happily send you afterwards all the things that you could do with toddlers because it's endless with sensory play. Let me see what else we have. I'm gonna unmute everybody right now so that if you have any other questions, you can ask. Okay, how do you play? Okay, it says, how do you play with a musical toddler? I'm guessing this would mean a toddler who likes a lot of music, or maybe a toddler who likes to maybe listen to songs and that kind of thing. One of the things that you can do with somebody who really likes music is use that to help to develop their skills. So if it's a toddler who likes to maybe play drums and play with music, you can have them imitate you doing a certain pattern. So if your toddler is just, banging, 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 you could do it where you start to do a pattern and then wait and see if they will imitate you doing the same kind of thing. And then you could do turn taken and have her take a turn, take a turn, take a turn. Seeing a follow-up here on the tablet, on your tablet, you have different apps where you can have a xylophone, a piano. I had a xylophone one on my iPad a few years ago that I used to use with young children, especially, and I thought it was really good because we would do things like, well, I had the xylophone and I had a real xylophone too, and it could be something like I would hit the chord on my xylophone and they would have to hit the chord on their xylophone, and then you work with that, or the real toy one. For the real toy one, you can do the same thing. Hit one chord, you can sing Twinkle Twinkle, and even if you're not hitting the right chord, still, once the child is engaged in the play, you can still hit the chord for that one. For attention wise, we will talk a little bit more about attention as we go along, because I know that attention spans, that's something that is a big problem for many people, all ages, from young all the way right up. I know attention span is something that we will have to address, and we will address that a little later on too, again, when Kevin comes on, because that has to do a lot with behavior, because attention could be behavioral sensory. So for his session, we will be addressing attention a little bit more. All right, so basically the takeaway from today is a parent said it really, really nicely on the chat a little while ago, that a lot of it comes down to observation and just kind of looking at seeing where a child is, what they like to do, what type of play they might be engaging in right now, and wherever they are now, that's where you're going to be working with them. And then from there, you can start to build these skills as they go along. But as much as possible, for any child, no matter what stage they're at, is about just trying to introduce them to as many opportunities to play as possible, whether it's free play or whether you have the structured play. Yes, beanbags are amazing. You can do so many things with beanbags for toddlers too. All right. So thank you everybody for coming today. I know, a chat like this could easily go on for hours and hours, but we have a short time. One last question. I'm seeing something with how to curb them from throwing or pelting everything that they are holding with. The throwing and pelting and this kind of thing is one of those things that all children tend to do. But it comes back to looking at where their level of play is. So it might be working more with sensory play, and maybe instead of giving them something in their hands that they're going to hold and throw, you might want to develop the sensory skills a little better and have them play in something so they get a lot of sensory experience, even though they're not going to be picking it up and throwing it. Try water. If I'll be touching on hypotonia later in the series. It depends on what aspect of it. I don't have a fidget coming on, but I could. If you have a question that you would like me to answer, let me know and I will touch on it as it relates to development. So yeah. All right. So again, send in any questions that you have for me so that we can answer it offline. And we will see you all next week again for another riveting session with Dr. Bratt. I just want to say thank you, especially to Gabby today for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. Congratulations on your soon-to-be OT career that you will have. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week.